Have you ever stumbled upon an object so strange, so powerful, that it seemed to hold a life of its own? In today's story, we'll uncover the chilling tale of a vintage camera one that doesn't just capture moments, but changes them. This isn't just any camera. Its photographs develop into something more than memory as they come alive, with secrets, with dark forces, and with warnings from beyond. When a young woman discovers this mysterious relic, she unknowingly steps into a world where the line between the living and the dead is thinner than ever before. What happens when you realize the very device you hold in your hands has the power to alter reality and the past? Stay with us as we unravel the terrifying truth behind the photograph that changes itself. Don't look away, because the story we're about to tell is one that you won't soon forget. Emma Hayes, a 28-year-old aspiring photographer, had always been drawn to the charm of vintage items. With her curly auburn hair tied into a loose bun and a camera bag slung over her shoulder, she often roamed the streets of her small Massachusetts town in search of inspiration. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the golden leaves crunched beneath her boots, she stumbled upon a quaint, forgotten shop nestled between two larger storefronts. The shop's faded sign read, "Elliot's Curiosities," and its window displayed a mishmash of dusty antiques. Among the clutter, one item stood out: a sleek, black vintage camera perched on a velvet cloth. The soft sunlight reflecting off its metal frame made it impossible for Emma to resist stepping inside. Inside, the store smelled of aged wood and leather. Behind the counter stood a man in his 70s, wearing a thick cardigan and glasses with lenses so thick they magnified his blue eyes. "Welcome," he said in a deep voice. "Looking for something special today?" Emma gestured toward the camera. "That piece, it's stunning. How much is it?" The man, Mr. Elliot, hesitated, running his fingers along the counter. "That camera has a peculiar history," he said slowly, as if weighing his words. "It once belonged to a photographer who captured moments that no one should have seen. It said the camera takes more than just photographs." Emma chuckled nervously, thinking it was just an old man's attempt to make a sale. "I'll take it," she said, ignoring the ominous tone in his voice. Mr. Elliot sighed, wrapping the camera carefully. "Be cautious," he warned as he handed it to her. Emma left the shop, her excitement outweighing any lingering sense of unease. As she walked home, the camera felt heavier than she expected, almost as if it carried the weight of its own story. Back in her cozy apartment, Emma set the camera on her wooden desk by the window. Her space was warm and inviting, with shelves lined with photography books and framed pictures she had taken over the years. She examined the camera closely, marveling at its craftsmanship. A quick check revealed a roll of film already inside. "Lucky me," she murmured, assuming the film was left behind by its previous owner. Later that night, as she curled up on her couch with a mug of tea, a faint clicking noise echoed from her desk. Emma froze, her heart pounding. She glanced toward the desk, where the camera sat motionless under the moonlight streaming through the window. Shaking her head, she dismissed it as her imagination and went to bed. But the clicking returned in the early hours of the morning. Emma woke abruptly, the sound sharper this time. She tiptoed to the desk, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The camera was exactly as she had left it, yet the unease in her chest grew stronger. Determined to figure out what was going on, Emma decided to have the roll of film developed the next day. She visited a small photo lab run by a friendly young man named Jake, who was known for his meticulous work. "This is a cool find," Jake said, inspecting the camera. "I'll have the photos ready by tomorrow." Emma thanked him and left, her mind racing with possibilities about what the images might reveal. That evening, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of her apartment seemed amplified, every shadow elongated. She tried to distract herself with a book, but her eyes kept drifting toward the camera on her desk. When she finally fell asleep, her dreams were filled with blurred images and the relentless sound of a camera shutter. The next day, Emma returned to the lab. Jake handed her an envelope of prints, his usual smile replaced by a furrowed brow. "These are strange," he said hesitantly. Emma opened the envelope, her hands trembling. Inside were photos of familiar places in town, but they felt wrong. Each one seemed to capture a moment frozen in time, but she hadn't taken any of them. Emma stared at the photos, her pulse quickening as she flipped through them. The first image was of a park near her apartment, its benches eerily empty, despite the time of day the photo seemed to capture. The shadows of trees stretched unnaturally, their forms almost human-like in their distortion. She remembered passing that park yesterday, but hadn't taken any pictures. The next photo was even more unsettling. It depicted the main street of her town, but something about it was off. The storefronts were dark, their windows shattered, and the streetlights flickered in the image, frozen mid-burst. A lone figure stood at the far end of the street, their face obscured by shadows. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Each photo was like a glimpse into a warped version of her world. The diner she often visited appeared abandoned, with chairs overturned and menus scattered across the floor. The once vivid neon sign looked cracked, the word "open" flickering faintly in the photograph. As Emma studied the images, she felt an overwhelming sense of unease, as if she were witnessing the aftermath of a disaster that hadn't happened yet. Then came the most chilling photo of all. It was of her apartment building. The windows were shattered, and the door to her unit was ajar. In the foreground of the photo, her camera was visible, sitting on the desk where she had left it. But what made her blood run cold was the faint reflection in the shattered glass of the window. It was her face, but her expression was one of terror. Emma slammed the envelope shut, her hands trembling. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake, who had been watching her reaction, stepped closer. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Emma hesitated, unsure of how to explain what she was seeing. These aren't my photos," she finally managed to say. Jake furrowed his brow. "What do you mean? The film came from your camera." Emma shook her head, her thoughts racing. "I didn't take these," she insisted. "And some of these places, they don't even look like this in real life." She pointed at the photo of the park, where the trees cast unnatural shadows. "It's like they're showing something else, something wrong." Jake studied the photos again, his expression shifting from confusion to unease. "Maybe it's some kind of double exposure or a flaw in the film," he suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. Emma wasn't convinced either. The images were too vivid, too deliberate, to be a mere accident. As Emma left the lab, the envelope of photos clutched tightly in her hand. She felt an oppressive weight settle over her. The street seemed quieter than usual, and the few people she passed avoided her gaze. Her mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. How could these photos exist? And why did they feel so personal, so threatening? When she arrived home, Emma placed the photos on her desk beside the camera. She stared at the object, its once charming appearance now menacing. For a moment, she considered getting rid of it, throwing it away, or smashing it to pieces. But something stopped her, a nagging curiosity that refused to let go. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma couldn't sleep. The photos haunted her thoughts, their eerie images burned into her memory. She kept glancing toward the desk, half expecting the camera to move on its own. The quiet of her apartment felt oppressive, every creak of the floorboards amplifying her anxiety. Little did she know, the real nightmare was only beginning. Emma woke abruptly to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. She grabbed it, her eyes blurry from sleep, and saw a message from Jake. "You need to come back to the lab. I found something else." The message sent a shiver down her spine. What more could there be? She dressed quickly and made her way to the photo lab, the street still shrouded in early morning mist. Jake was waiting for her at the counter, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a tension she'd never seen before. "What's going on?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Jake handed her a second envelope, smaller than the first. "After you left, I decided to examine the negatives more closely," he said. "And, well, you need to see this." Emma opened the envelope with shaky hands. Inside was a single photograph, printed on glossy paper. It was a close-up of a man's face, pale and wide-eyed, frozen in an expression of terror. She didn't recognize him, but the image sent a wave of nausea through her. The lighting and angle suggested the photo was taken at the exact moment of his death. "I didn't print this," Jake said, his voice low. "It just appeared. I swear I didn't touch anything after developing your film." Emma's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she muttered. "Who is he? Why would this be on my film?" Jake pointed to a faint reflection in the man's eyes, magnified by the camera lens. Emma leaned closer, her stomach churning as she realized what it was. The reflection showed the vintage camera her camera pointed directly at him. "This has to be a trick," she said, shaking her head. "There's no way." Jake stepped back, clearly unnerved. "I don't know what's going on, but this is bad, Emma. You should get rid of that thing. It's not normal." His words echoed in her mind as she left the lab, the photo tucked carefully into her bag. She wanted to believe there was a logical explanation, but deep down, she felt the weight of something darker, something malevolent. Back in her apartment, Emma sat at her desk, staring at the camera. It looked so innocuous, sitting there in the soft glow of her desk lamp. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her, waiting for something. She pulled out the photograph of the man and studied it again, searching for clues. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable, and it mirrored her own growing terror. That night, Emma's dreams were plagued by images of the man from the photograph. He appeared in shadowy hallways and abandoned streets, always reaching for her, his face contorted in silent screams. She woke drenched in sweat, her heart pounding, only to hear the faint clicking sound again. It was coming from the camera. Emma crept toward the desk, her breath shallow. The clicking stopped as she reached for the camera, her fingers trembling as they hovered above it. Suddenly, the lens turned slightly, as if adjusting to focus on her. She gasped, stumbling backward, her chair clattering to the floor. Fighting the urge to flee, Emma grabbed her phone and searched for any history of cursed cameras or similar occurrences. She found scattered stories, mostly urban legends, about objects that could trap souls or act as conduits for malevolent forces. None of it felt real until now. By morning, Emma decided she couldn't handle this alone. She called her friend Alex, a journalist known for his fascination with the paranormal. "You won't believe what's happening," she said when he answered. "I need your help." Little did she know, Alex's involvement would only deepen the mystery and put both their lives at risk. Alex arrived at Emma's apartment within the hour, his messenger bag slung over his shoulder and a look of curiosity mixed with concern on his face. "Okay, Emma," he said, stepping inside. "You've got me intrigued. Show me this camera." Emma hesitated, glancing toward the desk where the vintage device sat innocently. "It's there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex approached it, pulling on a pair of gloves from his bag like a seasoned investigator. "Better safe than sorry," he muttered, carefully lifting the camera. He examined it closely, turning it over in his hands. "This is a rare model," he noted, pointing to the etched serial number on the base. "Mid-20th century, probably custom-made. But this engraving here." He traced a faint series of symbols on the underside, barely visible against the worn metal. "These aren't standard." Emma leaned closer, her unease growing. "What are they?" she asked. Alex snapped a photo of the symbols with his phone and began searching online. After a few minutes, he frowned. "They look like sigils," he said. "Occult symbols. People used them to seal things, sometimes to protect, sometimes to trap." Emma's stomach churned. "Trap what?" she asked, dreading the answer. Alex shook his head. I don't know yet, but it's not good. Where did you even get this thing? She explained the estate sale, mentioning the woman's warning about the camera's unusual nature. I thought it was just superstition, she added, her voice shaking. Alex listened carefully, his expression growing graver with each detail. It's possible this thing has a history, he said. If it's been passed around for decades, there might be records, news stories, maybe even police reports. He opened his laptop and began typing furiously. As Alex searched, Emma felt a cold draft sweep through the room. The air seemed to thicken, and the faint clicking sound echoed again. Do you hear that? She whispered. Alex froze, glancing at the camera, which now sat motionless on the desk. Yeah, he said cautiously. It's coming from the camera. Suddenly, the room's lights flickered, plunging them into brief darkness. When the light returned, Alex's laptop screen displayed a photo, a new one, not from Emma's collection. It was of them, sitting at the desk, the exact moment they were living, captured perfectly. Emma gasped, stumbling backward. How is that possible? She cried. Alex's face paled. This isn't just a cursed object, he said. It's sentient, or something connected to it is. It's documenting us now. Emma's fear morphed into panic as she watched the photo flicker and change on the screen. The image showed Alex standing over the camera, his expression turning from curiosity to terror. What do we do? Emma asked, her voice trembling. Alex didn't respond immediately, his focus on the sigils he had photographed. We need to find out what this thing wants, he said finally. And we need to do it fast. If this camera is showing us what's about to happen, we might not have much time. Alex worked frantically at his laptop, cross-referencing the sigils on the camera with online archives. Emma paced the room, her nerves unraveling as the clicking sound grew more frequent. What's taking so long? She asked, her voice sharp with panic. I think I found something, Alex said, ignoring her question. He turned the laptop to show her an old newspaper article scanned into a paranormal forum. The headline read, Local photographer vanishes after alleged spirit summoning. The story told of a man named Harold Graves, a renowned photographer in the 1950s who was fascinated with capturing images of the supernatural. According to the article, Harold had used the same camera Emma now owned in an attempt to photograph spirits during a seance. Witnesses claimed Harold disappeared that night, leaving only his camera behind. Emma's throat tightened as she read the account. You're saying this camera is haunted? She asked, though the answer seemed painfully obvious. Alex nodded grimly. Haunted isn't even the right word. It's cursed. Whatever Harold summoned during that seance trapped it in the camera. Suddenly, the laptop screen flickered, displaying another photograph. This one showed Harold Graves himself, sitting in a dark room, his eyes hollow and lifeless. Beneath the photo was a single line of text. He's still here. Emma recoiled, her pulse racing. What does that mean? She demanded. Alex stared at the screen, his face pale. It means Harold didn't just vanish, he said. His soul, his essence might be tied to the camera, just like the spirits he tried to summon. The room grew colder, and Emma hugged herself to keep warm. So how do we stop it? She asked. How do we break the curse? Alex sighed, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. Curses usually have an anchor, he explained. An object or event that ties the spirit to this plane. If we can find out what that is, we might be able to sever the connection. As if on cue, the camera lens adjusted with a faint click. Another photo printed from the old Polaroid slot on its side. Emma hesitated, then reached for the print, her hand trembling. The image showed an abandoned house, its windows shattered, and the front door hanging ajar. Scrawled at the bottom in faded ink were the words, "Find me here." Alex leaned over her shoulder, studying the photo. "Do you recognize this place?" he asked. Emma shook her head. but something about the house felt disturbingly familiar. "I don't think so," she said, "but I feel like I've seen it before." "Then that's our next stop," Alex said, packing his laptop and grabbing a flashlight. "If this is where Harold disappeared or where the curse began, we might find what we need to end this." Emma hesitated, dread clawing at her chest. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. Alex gave her a reassuring nod, though his eyes betrayed his own fear. "We don't have much choice," he said. "If we don't go, the camera will keep taking and it's only a matter of time before it takes us." As they left the apartment, the camera clicked once more behind them. Neither noticed the faint image developing on its Surfacia photo of the abandoned house, with two shadowy figures standing at its entrance. Emma and Alex stood before the abandoned house from the photograph, its dilapidated exterior looming against the dark sky. The air was unnaturally still, as if the world itself were holding its breath. "This is it," Alex said, gripping the flashlight tightly. Emma shivered, clutching the cursed camera in her hands. The creaking door opened with a soft push, revealing a dim, dusty interior. Furniture lay overturned, and broken glass crunched underfoot as they stepped inside. The atmosphere was suffocating, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. "Stay close," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. The camera clicked suddenly, startling them both. Emma fumbled to catch the developing photograph, her hands trembling. The image showed a room within the housey, large parlor with an ornate mirror on the wall. Scrawled beneath it were the words, "End it here." They followed the house's eerie layout, navigating its decaying halls until they found the parlor. The mirror in the photo hung crooked on the far wall, its surface cracked like a spider web. A faint glow emanated from its center, casting an unnatural light across the room. Alex approached the mirror cautiously, his reflection distorted by the broken glass. "There's something behind it," he said, pressing his hand against the surface. Emma hung back, clutching the camera tightly. "Be careful," she warned, her voice wavering. With a grunt, Alex pulled the mirror away from the wall, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a faded photo of Harold Graves, standing beside the very camera Emma now held. A handwritten note beneath the photo read, "To release what's trapped, the lens must break." Emma's heart raced. "Break the camera?" she asked, her grip tightening on the device. Alex nodded, his expression grim. "It's the anchor. If we destroy it, we might be able to sever the connection and free whatever's inside." Before Emma could respond, the temperature in the room plummeted. A shadowy figure began to form in the mirror's reflection, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes. It was Harold Graves, his spectral form flickering with malevolent energy. "You mustn't," the ghostly figure hissed, its voice like shards of ice. Emma froze, her terror paralyzing her as Harold's spirit stepped closer, his form solidifying with each moment. "The camera is mine," he rasped. "It holds what must never be freed." Alex grabbed a nearby chair and raised it over the camera. "No!" Harold screamed, his voice echoing through the house. The walls trembled, and a deafening roar filled the air as Alex brought the chair down with all his strength. The camera shattered, its pieces scattering across the floor. A blinding light erupted from the lens, and Harold's spirit let out an agonized wail. The sound faded as his form disintegrated, leaving behind only silence. Emma and Alex stood in the stillness, their breaths heavy. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and for the first time, the house felt empty. "It's over," Alex said, his voice shaking with relief. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the shattered remnants of the cursed camera. As they exited the house, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. They walked away, leaving the abandoned house and its dark secrets behind. But neither noticed a faint clicking sound, echoing from the rubble, a final reminder that some curses are harder to destroy than they seem. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more chilling and mysterious tales like this one, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you content like this. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. Share it with your friends who love a good mystery, and let us know in the comments what you thought about this story. See you next time.